About 5.5 years ago, in a science classroom about 300 feet that way, I did my first chemistry lab. And in the most archetypal fashion, we studied the reaction of baking soda and vinegar. Each of us were given a little foil pouch containing a mystery powder, inside of which was a smaller packet of what was billed to us as magic water. And when I popped that little packet of magic water, I watched with delight as the foil pouch grew and grew and grew before loudly bursting open. And so, of course, we called it the Bomb Bag Lab. And how could that not make a 13-year-old boy fall in love with science? Fast forward a few years and I found myself in a few more science classes. But I noticed something. The way science was presented was in 3 distinct segments. First, there was physics, with fundamental particles and waves and mechanics. Then there was chemistry, focusing on how those fundamental particles and elements interact. And then there was biology, focusing on how those molecules interact to make you and me and everything alive. So science, as it was presented to me, looked like this. 3 pillars, all separate. But I remember an elementary school teacher telling me one time that 1 + 1 is greater than 2. Not a math teacher. But what she meant was that 2 people working together would achieve more than they would achieve if they were both working independently. And so I want to use that same principle on these principles of science, namely these parts of the Venn diagram. We'll start small and go big, but the whole time I want you to keep that idea that 1 + 1 is greater than 2 in mind. So first we'll zoom in on the intersection of chemistry and physics. So I've already lost about half of you, but stick with me. Chemistry and physics intersect at a very interesting spot called quantum computing. And you're going, what is that? So a quantum is a noun meaning the smallest possible quantity of a thing. A quantum of light is a photon, a quantum of an element is an atom, a quantum of solace is Daniel Craig. We get the picture. And quantum computing relies heavily on physics since it harnesses the properties of super small particles that we don't even fully understand to make calculations. In a conventional computer, a bit of information, as it's called, has to be either a 0 or a 1. It's binary. But in quantum computing, a qubit of information, as it's called, can be anywhere between 0 and 1 or both at once, which seems kind of fake, but it's actually amazing because for the first time, computers can deal with uncertainty. How many people in this room have ever been uncertain about something? Exactly. This world is full of uncertainty, but until now, computers really haven't been able to deal with that. But these computers' ability to model uncertainty has basically everybody super excited, but especially chemists. Because as it turns out, conventional computers aren't that great at modeling the nitty-gritty details of molecules. The structure and position of electrons and atoms and bonds is just way too much. Drugs today, such as the breast cancer treatment tamoxifen and the antibiotic doxycycline, already have fairly complex chemical structures. But pharmaceutical companies want to use quantum computers to model huge molecules. Because these computers can deal with uncertainty, modeling large molecules becomes much less daunting. Specifically, they're looking to target one disease, Alzheimer's disease, a sickness which has historically evaded treatment. But by using quantum computing to gain a better understanding of how big molecules will actually behave, pharmaceutical companies stand a chance against this sickness. And this is a big deal, because Alzheimer's disease is expected to impact more than 7 million Americans by 2025. By using quantum computers in conjunction with pharmaceutical development, we can aid the afflictions of potentially millions down the line. So, while the intersection of physics and chemistry may encompass healthcare on the small scale with these drugs, the next intersection between biology and physics incorporates healthcare that's a little bit bigger, and that is making the next generation of prosthetics. Because new research in biomechanics and biophysics have allowed for the development of new materials engineering. We'll get back to that, because until not that long ago, prosthetics were made with wood and leather, and they were awkward and heavy and generally not ideal. In the 1970s and 1980s, some polycarbonate plastic-based alternatives were made, but it's only been in the past 15 years that carbon fiber and polycarbonate prosthetics have become really good. Developers have taken the art of making prostheses all the way to the Olympic level. Here's how. So when actors require heavy CGI in their roles, they have to wear all of these dots that track their movements. And the same exact thing is done with athletes being fitted for prosthetics. They wear sensors and their movements are tracked to within 0.5 millimeters error. This much. This gives developers information about what each individual joint and muscle is doing, how much force is being created, and how much power is being executed. And this is anatomy and physiology, a major segment of biology at work. As biomechanicists have become more data-driven in their work, their ability to manufacture prosthetics that mirror real limbs is better than ever, letting athletes keep on playing and people keep on moving comfortably. Now, remember that next generation of prosthetics I said we'd come back to? We're doing that now. So chemists have even gotten involved with the development of prosthetics because a material known as carbon fiber, made by stacking sheets of carbon atoms on top of each other, is perfect for prosthetics. It's 5 times as light as steel, while also being 5 times as strong. It's a win-win. Now, you can imagine that with everybody coming together to manufacture these prosthetics that they are well made. But they're so well made that earlier this year, a team of scientists from Emory University, Georgia Tech, and California State University researched whether these athletic prosthetics were better than natural limbs. And although they found no unfair advantage at the Olympics, the question and the comparison are telling. A new generation of prosthetics is allowing everyone to chase their dreams more comfortably. And that is the power of biophysics. So now everybody shake it out, relax. We're going to talk about something more topical now as we move to the final intersection between chemistry and biology. And here we find vaccines. Specifically, we're going to discuss the mRNA vaccines developed in a response to the coronavirus. So mRNA, or messenger RNA, is this chain-like strand whose links are represented by the letters C, U, A, and G. And it's super important because it's the code that our bodies read to produce proteins. No proteins, no us. And biology tells us that if a cell reads a strand of mRNA, it will produce the protein that the sequence corresponds to through a stepped process known as translation. And for decades, scientists have been trying to exploit this mechanism for medicinal gain. Specifically, this is where chemistry gets involved. Because if you put the right building blocks in the right order, you can make a strand of mRNA that corresponds to basically any protein you want. And chemists have a well-established procedure to make synthetic mRNA in a lab. In this case, the response to the coronavirus, developers chose to make a strand of mRNA which corresponds to the defining feature of a coronavirus, the spike protein, which looks like this. Hundreds of these proteins stud the outside of a coronavirus, giving it its titular crown-like appearance. And when you receive the shot containing all of this mRNA, your body begins to produce copies of this spike protein. Because when mRNA gets injected into your body, it doesn't announce that it's foreign. All your cells know is to read mRNA and make proteins. That is, to a point. Eventually, your body realizes that this influx of proteins is not actually it. And this realization triggers your immune system, leading to the production of antibodies for COVID-19 without an infection. Bam. It required biology to know how these vaccine components would function in the body and chemistry to create them. The union of these subjects in mRNA vaccines has saved an estimated 20 million lives so far in this pandemic. So, those are my 3 stories for you. They might seem a little bit disjoint. Quantum computers, prosthetics, and mRNA vaccines, how do those relate to each other, right? But they're all examples of what happens when we use interdisciplinary thinking within science. About 10 minutes ago, I asked you to keep the idea that 1 + 1 is greater than 2 in mind. I hope you did that, because look at what happens when we combined physics and chemistry, for instance. Physics created a quantum computer, which chemistry applied to pharmaceuticals, which informs healthcare, which can better lives. When we combined biology and physics, we informed material science, which augmented mobility for people requiring prosthetics, again, improving lives. And finally, the intersection between biology and chemistry fueled vaccine development on a global scale, helping to control a pandemic and, you guessed it, save lives. So what's the point, you ask? It's that when we use interdisciplinary thinking in science, the sciences can apply each other to the real world with impacts that we all feel. And it's by understanding this Venn diagram method of thinking that we can understand what my elementary school teacher really meant when she said that 1 + 1 is greater than 2. Thank you.